Good morning. I'm Lauren McKenna, Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association. I wanted to welcome you all today. As most of you know, today is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and it was launched by the United Nations 15 years ago by the World Health Organization and the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. Today is an opportunity to raise awareness about the elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. It's a legal crisis, a public health crisis, and a human rights crisis. And we're here today in Philadelphia to recognize this important day, both here and around the world. Millions of older Americans face devastating violence and physical and emotional and financial abuse. They lose billions of dollars annually due to elder financial abuse and exploitation, and funds that could be used to pay for basic needs such as housing, food, and medical care. Unfortunately, though, this is an occurrence that is very commonplace, and it could involve anyone, a family member, a neighbor, even you. It's estimated that 1 in 14 cases of elder abuse is reported to authorities, only 1 in 14. Of Philadelphia's population of 1.5 million people, nearly 1 in 5 is over the age of 60, and half of those older Philadelphians live near or below the federal poverty level. Our association and other organizations in Philadelphia, including the Philadelphia Financial Exploitation Prevention Task Force, Senior Law Center, and the Philadelphia Corporation for Aging, the CARI, which is the Center for Rights and Interest of the Elderly, the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center of the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania, located in City Hall, the Philadelphia Police Department, and the Office of the District Attorney are all engaged in the discovery, prosecution, and elimination of elder abuse in our community. There's a lot to be done, and that's why we're so proud to host this event today, and I welcome our panelists. I'd like to thank our organizers, the Probate and Trust Law Sections, Elder Law, and Guardianship Committee, and our panelists for joining us to provide a fuller picture of how this issue is impacting Philadelphia and how our legal community, our Bar Association community, can be part of the solution. Now I'd like to introduce the co-chairs of the Elder Law and Guardianship Committee, Bess Collier of Feldman and Feldman, and Rosalind Carlin of the Law Office of Rosalind Carlin Esquire. Please join me today and every day in voicing your support of the issues that we will focus on today and solutions for the elderly in our community. Thank you, and I'll turn this over to our co-chairs.
Good morning. Thank you, Chancellor Lauren. My name is Bess Collier. I'm associate at Feldman and Feldman.
Good morning, I'm Roz Carlin. I have my own law practice, which focuses on guardianships, estate planning, and state administration.
Roz and I are the co-chairs of the Elder Law and Guardianship Committee of the Probate and Trust section of the Philadelphia Bar Association. The focus of our committee is on the legal issues surrounding guardianships and the issues faced by the elder community and their caregivers.
We help plan this webinar on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day to help make people aware of elder abuse. Through this webinar, we hope to bring awareness and tools to protect our elderly from the abuse, neglect, and exploitation experienced by so many in our society.
It is my privilege to introduce the speakers for today. First, we have the Honorable Sheila Wood Skipper, President Judge Emeritus of the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas and current Administrative Judge of the Orphans Court Division. Judge Wood Skipper will discuss both the roles of the judiciary in protecting our elderly and the resources available to our elder citizens via the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center at City Hall. I would also like to introduce Brendan Corvallis, the Assistant Director of Victim Services at the Senior Law Center. Brendan will discuss the various types of elder abuse and the possible legal remedies. Finally, we have Naja Orr, President and CEO of the Philadelphia Corporation for the Aging. Naja will provide an overview of critical services and supports that assist older residents at risk for abuse, neglect, financial exploitation, and abandonment.
If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat and we will ask as many as possible during this webinar. There will also be some time for questions after each speaker. We hope that you find this program eye-opening and helpful. Thank you to our speakers and thank you again for joining us. And with that, our first presenter is Brendan Corvallis.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the Philadelphia Bar Association, Chancellor McKenna, the Probate Law Sections Elder Long Guardianship Committee, and all of those Tracy Rachel who worked so hard to provide us with this forum today. I'd also like to acknowledge my distinguished co-panelists, the Honorable Sheila Woods Skipper and Naja Orr, President and CEO of the Philadelphia Corporation for Aging. Both of them have reputations that are well-deserved as champions for access to justice, and both of them have supported and advocated the work that senior law does, as well as advocating and supporting older victims of crime and abuse. And it's an honor to sit with them at this panel. As said, my name is Brendan Cavallis. I'm the Assistant Director of Victim Services here at Senior Law Center. Our Victim Service Unit is VOCA funded, that's the Victims Department. And together with our amazing director, Leah Finlayson, I manage a team of 20 attorneys and legal advocates, not only working here in Philadelphia, but also in Bucks, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery counties. Just briefly, a little bit about senior law, what we do. We're the largest provider solely devoted to legal services for seniors in Pennsylvania. We're an independent nonprofit organization founded in 78. That is, we serve over 5,000 seniors every year across the Commonwealth, and we provide direct individual representation here in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, as well as legal advice, information, referral services, community legal education, professional training, under the leadership of Karen Buck, who is truly a voice for older Pennsylvanians. We advocate systemically for local, regional, and national changes. We focus on the need, the greatest economic and social need of clients. All of our services are free. 41 years of service that we're celebrating. So I'd like to just begin with some statistics. In fact, Chancellor McKenna gave us some ideas of the numbers. They're not heartening by any means. But also just to put this in perspective, Pennsylvania is one of the oldest states in the Union, not just that it was one of the colonies, but because we have 2.8 million seniors currently. That's the 5th largest percentage of seniors in the US. Someone's saying they can't hear me. Hold on, let's see if this is better. Apologize. Is that better? Okay. So we are the 5th largest percentage of seniors in the United States, as the chancellor was saying about Philadelphia. Also, the same applies to the Commonwealth. 1 in 4 Pennsylvanians are seniors today. 24% of all Pennsylvania households include 1 or more seniors. And it's going to continue that trend because it's estimated that by 2035, there will be 78 million people 65 years and older compared to 76 million who are under the age of 18. We talked a little, the chancellor again talked about the reporting and the underreporting, but just 1 in 14 are reported, true. But for every case of elder abuse that is reported, there's likely between 43 to 50 cases that are reported. So the reported cases are just the tip of the iceberg. The types of abuse that are most common, there are many types of abuse, and abuse is always about power. It's always about exercising dominion and control. I think there are many different forms. So here at Senior Law, most often we see physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, and financial exploitation. Number one offender, the factor that talked about is older adult children. So there are lots of other kinds of abusive situations that occur, but overwhelmingly, this is a family affair. It's domestic violence, and that brings a lot of things with it, right? So some of the things that we can do for these types of abuse, depending on the case and the facts, is we, of course, represent protection from abuse in PFA court here in Philadelphia and the outside counties. But we also can do things like file ejectment to get an abuser out of the home, where it's not a landlord-tenant situation, where it's a family member. We can file title actions when we have popular deed transfers, which is very common here in Philadelphia, as I'm sure you're aware. We can engage in litigation in orphans court when there are breaches of fiduciary duties, such as engaging under POA, very common, or even an appointed guardian. We do civil litigation, so we can bring actions in civil fraud. We can look through this is in consumer protection law. the Philadelphia Fair Practice Ordinance, and sections of the Fair Housing Act, which are not specifically guaranteeing survivors of domestic violence any particular rights. They're not a special or protected class. However, there are many things that we can do if someone is being discriminated against based on being a survivor of domestic violence, and that's something that we engage in quite a bit. So, for example, what would that look like? So, you can have somebody who has been a victim of abuse and is asking for a transfer to another place, and we can sometimes move that into a higher priority so that happens for where someone may have been a victim of abuse and now they're looking for some sort of special or reasonable accommodation, right? Maybe a therapy animal or some sort of other accommodation, and we can advocate for that. The biggest types of scams that we really see are financial exploitation and physical abuse. I'm going to focus a little more on financial exploitation today because it's so overwhelming and it's really underreported, and people don't think of it as abuse, but it is. According to the Consumer Sentinel Network, since 2001, there's been about a 22% increase in overall scams or fraud. So these are generally stranger scams, right? So you're talking about 325,000 cases reported in 2001, and in 2020, 4.7 million cases. That's all kinds of cases, not just the elderly. But the elderly are, or people over 60 are often at greater risk for these kinds of things. We've seen an increase with the COVID scams. According to the AARP, they are spreading, as their quote is, it's spreading as fast or nearly as fast as the virus itself. And as of March of this year, the FTC logged about 369,000 consumer complaints related to COVID-19 and stimulus payments. And nearly 70% of those involve fraud or identity theft. Right? So that's something we've seen on the rise, and again, an unexpected consequence of COVID. In general, domestic violence cases have risen across the country, here in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia during the pandemic, because people are now forced to be in close quarters with their abusers. There's no sort of way to let off steam, right? People were locked up, so to speak, for a longer time. And that did definitely lead to an increase in violence and financial exploitation. So there was some legislation passed during COVID-19. It was Section 319 of the Public Health Service Act. You can look that up. And that has made it, that's in place currently, but we don't know how long it will stay, but it has made it a crime for anyone to engage in the deceptive and practice that affects commerce associated with COVID, whether that's treatment, cure, prevention, mitigation, that sort of thing. The biggest scam that we've seen here in Philadelphia is stimulus check fraud, right? And again, usually family members. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But what I would like to direct your attention to today is the opioid crisis, which is sort of voice on people's mouths and tongues or in the news this day. This is the crisis. This is the crisis that is affecting older adults in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia more than anything. This is the silent killer, and it's increasing. We have very limited data on this, but there are some estimates that there's been a 25 to 35% in drug-related exploitation cases, right? And there's a dangerous lack of resources for this kinds of things. So what would that look like? Well, for example, a grandparent may be raising or caring for a grandchild of parents who are addicted to opioids. Or family members, caregivers, or older adults may misuse the opioids, particularly adult children, right? So you have a perfect storm. You have untreated substance abuse. You have often untreated or undiagnosed mental illness. And you have an older person, often a parent. So this is indeed Sophie's choice. People are forced to, and they're very reluctant, right? No matter how horrible it's been, they're very reluctant to bring charges against or try to have some sort of legal remedy against their adult child. This is their child. This is very common. I mean, I probably get 3 or 4 calls in Escalon every day. I think it's something that we need to think about in a bigger picture. It's a family issue. It's a family matter. It impacts economics. housing, everything, as the chancellor had said, that sort of we don't think about, right? The costs of these kinds of pandemics and the costs of abuse. So parents have given their life savings and more, sometimes their homes, right? Basically to cheat an addiction. Of course, they don't think of it that way, right? They believe they're helping, the person will change. This is the most common scenario, and I see this in PFA court in the outer counties all the time as well. So I would just ask that people keep in mind that elder abuse is a topic, but we need to get to the roots of what's going on and address those. It's a holistic approach that we need to take. And older Americans are generally forgotten, I think, in the opioid crisis. It's sort of focused on the people who, the stereotype is it's young people using or this sort of thing, but that's not true. We won't get into it here, but also in the nursing homes, there's a misuse of opioids for treating elderly residents, right? And this can result in death. Basically, you're medicated to death. And it's been very difficult to treat that. And so I would point that as another form of abuse. We've had cases, for example, where a grandson had a heroin addiction. He was living with his elderly grandfather. The grandfather had frontal lobe dementia. And he stole $85,000 to support his heroin addiction. He was taking the money from, the debit card, right? Or writing checks to his friends. He was opening credit cards, all these kinds of things. So that's another type of case. We also had a case where a lawyer, embezzled $350,000 or more from a parent, and she was an agent under power of attorney. So this can happen to anybody, anywhere. It's got nothing to do with what you look like, what you sound like, where you live. Domestic violence, unfortunately, is probably the most equal opportunity employer. So you're dealing with some very complex issues when you're looking at these things. And of course, we've tried to focus on legal remedies at Senior Law Center, but nobody wins in family court. Everyone knows that. Nobody wins in these cases, right? We may have a quote unquote favorable outcome. We may remove an abuser, but that's just the beginning. Nobody comes to a PFA court, or an older person in our experience does not come to a PFA court or to Senior Law Center or to family law because of one incident. Usually it's years and years and years of buildup. And finally, they realize that their lives are in danger. More often, they're worried about another family member, and that's what brings them to us. So a lot of the laws that deal with this they're getting there, but they're not quite there. So in 2010, we had the Elder Justice Act, part of the Affordable Care Act, and it sort of was the first comprehensive legislation to address this. And it's a good start, but we need to go further. That's a federal piece of legislation, and we need to really work on our own legislations here at home. Philadelphia, of course, has an outstanding reputation, well-deserved, I believe, for its fair ordinance practice and for its protections of its residents. But that's not always true in the other counties. In fact, it's just not true. And I speak from personal experience, both as a litigator. So we do work with mostly with victims of, as I said, elder abuse and needing physical abuse, and also with financial exploitation. So what are some of the types of financial exploitation that we see? We see identity theft, withdrawals of and things such as that. We work hard to provide a holistic service. And we're very honored and happy to be here as part of this forum today for World Elder Awareness, Abuse Elder, WEAAD, as I'll say. But thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to speak. And please contact us at Senior Law Center if you have any questions. You can look at our website, www.seniorlawcenter.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. We just have one question for you, if you don't mind addressing. If you can, I don't know if he's back. Okay. If you could just, what are some subtle signs of elder abuse that lay people should look for in day to day?
Right. Well, we were chatting earlier, and And Judge Wood-Skipper really gave us a lot of good ideas. And she was talking about things that she looks for in her courts. But I don't want to steal her thunder, but she hit every single thing. So is somebody exercising undue influence, right? Is there a third party, whether it's a related to the person or not, who they're turning to for questions, right? Well, what should I say? What do you think? We get that on the phone a lot. That's a subtle sign, and a not so subtle sign. Clothing, are they dressed appropriately? Do they seem fearful and withdrawn? Is there a lack of eye contact? Is there a sense of something's not quite right because you're asking a question that you know sort of the answer to, and the response is, oh, no, everything's fine, everything's fine. It's all good, it's fine, we don't have a problem. So those are some of the subtle signs. It's not always somebody who has a huge bruise, or that can also happen. We see that, right? If there is a huge bruise and you hear the classic, I fell down the stairs. So those are signs and red flags.
Okay, so I know you had talked about financial exploitation. What are some practical things that family members can do in order to help prevent their parents or their loved ones who are elderly from being scammed?
Well, it's an interesting way that you phrase the question. We sort of focus on the seniors and what they can do empowering them. So one of the problems with the scams is that, people are ashamed, right? But we ask them to file a report with the police. We sort of look at what we do afterwards. In terms of prevention, we educate them and, do not ever, the IRS, Social Security, they will never call you on the phone, right? And they're not going to call you on the phone telling you that you have to pay them money or there's a sheriff coming to your door. So anything where a person is receiving a call or an email from an unknown person and there's any either threat or promise, right? You're going to win this award, or we've chosen you as a shopper. So family members could talk to their parents or older members of this sort of thing and just remind them that these scams exist. We generally, focusing on the prevention is very important, but we try to educate the seniors directly. So these are the kinds of things we tell the seniors, right? So look for these things. This is not going to ever happen to you. Harris is not going to call you saying you owe $14,000 to go to Walmart and get a gift. That's that scam. It's a gift card scam. So anytime we tell people, anytime that someone wants you to go to Walmart or Kmart or Best Buy or Lowe's and get gift cards for any reason, do not do it. And I would also just caution family members, don't ever think that your parents or your elderly family members are immune from this, no matter what education level they have, no matter what their street smarts are. It can happen to everybody. It does happen to everybody. Very sophisticated. So be on the lookout for any emails or texts or requests from unknown parties, and never give your information over the phone. Never give Social Security, bank card information, none of that. So if you get a scam from Microsoft, we tell people, if they think your computer, oh, your computer's been compromised, that sort of thing. The gift card scam someone's asking about is one of the sort of it's a shell game, right? So it's there are variations of it. The romance scam, okay? There's a romance, an older person who goes on a dating site or whatever, and they're developing this relationship. They groom them, they lure them in, right? So they have this wonderful relationship. We have a case like this. And then they say, oh, sweetheart, we've been together for 4 months. And of course, the picture, I'm going to get paid next week on my merchant seaman job in Russia, but I need $5,000 to cover something. Just let me that and I'll pay you right back. And so the way they ask them to pay that is to go to Lowe's. I can't take a check. I can't have anything wired because of the rules. So if you go and you get these gift cards, I'll stay on the phone with you. And then when you come out, scratch them up and just give me those numbers. So we have a client currently who's $22,000 in that. Of course, the problem is they don't come forward until much later, until they finally begin to realize it, because it's shameful for them and they feel stupid. So that's the gift card scam. There's lots of variations. You've been selected as an unwilling shopper, right? Or the IRS calls, but they say the only way you can pay is through a Walmart gift card. So anything with a gift card, anything. There's a million variations. Anything where someone's asking you to go to Walmart, go to Kmart, buy three $500 gift cards or 4 $200 gift cards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'd like to turn it over to Naja Orr, the President and CEO of Philadelphia Corporation for Aging.
Good morning. Thanks, Bess and Roz. Once again, my name is Nadja Orr. I'm the President and CEO of the Philadelphia Corporation for Aging. I'd first like to start by thanking the Philadelphia Bar Association for bringing us together for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and of course, some of my fellow panelists for their tremendous advocacy and support of the residents that we serve and for being a part of such an important topic. I'll start by giving you a brief snapshot of the Philadelphia Corporation for Aging, as we call ourselves, PCA, and the Area Agency on Aging Network, the AAAs. The foundation for what we do really started with the Older Americans Act of 1965, which created the framework for federal, state, and local offices to meet the growing needs of older adults age 60 and over and allow them to live independently in their homes and community as long as possible. PCA was created almost 50 years ago now as a result of the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act in 1973, which designated the AAAs as those offices to meet the local service and support needs of older adults across the nation. So PCA is the Area Agency on Aging for Philadelphia County. We're one of 52 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and there's more than 600 area agencies on aging across the country. I will say that Pennsylvania does remain unique because we have the Pennsylvania Lottery to support our older adults. In addition to providing the supports through our offices at the AAAs, it also supports transportation services through the Shared Ride Program for older adults, rent and property tax rebates, and prescription drug coverage through the PACE program. Regarding the specific services that we provide at PCA, we generally like to consider ourselves as the front door to the service and support system for older adults. Even if it's not a service that we're going to provide, we want to make sure people are linked to the support that's going to most meet their needs best. PA, like most area agencies on aging, generally follow three different paths to supporting older adults in the community. The first path is assisting older adults with remaining connected to their community. That would be programs like senior centers, health and wellness programs, volunteer opportunities, senior employment programs, the Shared Ride Program, et cetera. Then there's that middle path, assisting to ensure that additional supports are provided to older adults to stay safe in their communities as long as they can. That's where our care managers and service coordinators go into the homes, complete comprehensive assessments, and connect them to services like home care, home delivered meals, adult day services, medical equipment and supplies, and home modifications, et cetera. And then there's that last path, which is advocacy and protection, things like the Ombudsman program to ensure that we're addressing complaints of residents of long-term care services, legal supports and services, and of course, our Older Adult Protective Services Unit to do our part to ensure older adults live free from elder abuse. Our Older Adult Protective Services hotline is in operation 24/7, and we often get calls from professionals or anonymously from members of the community. We're responsible for receiving those reports of need and investigating alleged abuse for individuals age 60 and over. While we do accept reports of need for individuals under the age of 60, we do hand those under 60 cases off to the statewide contractor for the Department of Human Services. Since inception, PCA has grown to more than 30 programs, and we typically serve more than 140,000 individuals annually. If there's any questions related to older adults, we generally ask people to call our helpline, which is 215-765-9040, the same number that could be used for reporting elder abuse, or contacting us through our website, which is pcacares.org. I'll go through a few questions, general questions that typically come to us, and reiterate some of the points that Brendan made, because he did such a phenomenal job of going over a few points that we typically recommend for people as well. And the first one is, what are some of the signs of elder abuse that we generally look for? When we're training our staff, we often refer to things like the National Institute on Aging and the list of potential signs of elder abuse, things like the individual becomes withdrawn or stops taking part in activities that they generally enjoy. They're unkempt or disheveled in their appearance, weight loss, displays signs of trauma or unexplained bruises, cuts, scars, develops things like bed sores where they could otherwise be prevented, And then, of course, things like has a hazardous or unsafe or unclean living conditions, or displays signs of insufficient care of unpaid bills, despite having adequate financial resources to cover them. Another question we generally receive is, what do we usually recommend for individuals, family members of individuals that are in long-term care facilities to help prevent abuse? That's when we generally speak to family members when they suspect abuse, there may potentially be abuse of their loved ones in a long-term care facility. We suggest things like, of course, evaluating the facility, not only during the placement, but before the placement. For the loved one, you want to monitor your loved one's medical condition and status. Check for visual and non-visual signs of abuse, some of the ones that I mentioned earlier. Make frequent in-person visits, phone calls or virtual visits with individuals. So definitely stay in touch with the older adult and get to know the older adult rights, whether it's through federal regulations or making sure that you're getting to know the long-term care facility regulations. Of course, any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to the Ombudsman office if there is abuse suspected, or contacting our Older Adult Protective Services unit so we can look into your concerns. Another question we receive often is, what if there's no family that's able to care for the older adult? There's generally two options frequently used to address this issue, which depends on the capacity level of the older adult. If the older adult has capacity, we work with that older adult to assist them in obtaining services and supports to keep them safe and independent as long as they can safely stay in the community. If the older adult lacks capacity, we oftentimes use the supports from legal intervention that could be provided to assist the older adult, but we always look for the least restrictive intervention. I'll go into a little more detail related to guardianship in a few minutes. Another question, what are some of the preventative measures family members can take to prevent elder abuse? This is when we often discuss and establish a plan outlining the older adult's wishes in the event that an emergency were to take place, such as incapacity or life-sustaining care. We can't stress enough the importance of things like durable powers of attorney. If there's any questions related to the older adult capacity, we ask people to provide assistance to that older adult by monitoring things like their calls, their mail, and email for potential scams. We ask people to stay connected with their older adult loved one, whether it's making frequent in-person visits, phone calls, or virtual visits. And then, of course, introducing yourself to get to know all the parties that are involved in the older adult's life. Next question we receive is, what are some of the types of examples of financial exploitation? And I know Brendan hit on this a little bit earlier as well, that we generally see in our office in addition to accessing people's bank accounts. And that would be things like annuity and living trust scams, or deed theft and foreclosure rescue scams, healthcare scams, identity theft and credit card fraud, power of attorney abuse, which we'll touch on in a few minutes, reverse mortgage scams, and then of course, any undue influence on the older adult. You can find lists like this on the National Adult Protective Services Association website for a number of other types of scams related to financial exploitation as well. And then touching on COVID a bit, how has COVID impacted the type and number of cases that we have seen over the last year plus? COVID has unfortunately increased the amount of hospital and facility reports that we've received due to reported allegations of older adults leaving facilities and hospitals against medical advice at times. And we've also experienced an increase in calls with allegations of caregiver neglect due to things like absence of a caregiver or absence of a paid personal care aide who may have contracted COVID or was potentially exposed to someone who tested positive. What are the things that we witness as far as financial exploitation and abuse through the use of powers of attorney? We know that powers of attorney are generally given to someone that the older adult trusts and usually someone that they trust and they care for. Unfortunately, we do receive allegations of suspected exploitation or abuse, which is oftentimes related to disagreements amongst appointed powers of attorney and other family members, oftentimes between multiple powers of attorney who have been appointed by the same older adult. The reports of abuse often are related to inappropriate use of funds or failure to make decisions that are in the best interest of the older adult, and failure to keep a separate accounting of the funds from theirs and the older adult funds. How can older adults with moderate impairment stay in their homes and their communities versus having to go into an institutional setting? And this is where we use many guiding principles related to our Older Adult Protective Services Unit and the other services that we provide to ensure that we use self-determination to make sure that the consumer choice is our top priority, and we're using the least restrictive measures to ensure people can live in their homes and community as long as possible. We apply these principles by working with older adults to determine if there's a responsible caregiver in their life and someone who's capable of making the decisions if they're not. This is where I mentioned it a little earlier, where those lottery funds chip in for programs like the options program, where they would be meeting with our staff and we would complete a comprehensive care plan to meet their needs in the community. Also, if they're not eligible for lottery funded services, there are other programs out there, other funded services through the Department of Human Services, like the Community Health Choices program. And then if not, then there's oftentimes grant dollars available through, say, like the VOCA grant for Victims of Crimes Act funding that supports older adults and people who are potentially at risk for elder abuse. How's the role of, touching on a point that Brendan made as well, how's the role of opioids played either in older adults or both older adults and their caregivers' potential addictions? There's been a lot of discussion lately regarding the correlation between an increase in older adult protective service cases and the rise of the opioid epidemic. Many older adults commonly experience chronic health conditions and pain, and chronic pain is oftentimes associated with prescription opioids. Increased reports of opioid misuse have been documented among older adults and people close to them. We receive reports of individuals oftentimes stealing medication. Often also there are instances where we receive reports of opioid misuse, where we could see co-occurring abuse such as financial exploitation, emotional abuse, or physical harm. Next question that we generally receive is, Philadelphia is, of course, we all know, a very diverse city in terms of ethnicity and race, and what are some of the things that our office does to support our minority and underserved populations? This is where our community engagement department has conducted outreach with underserved populations, immigrant communities, and communities of color. Pre-COVID, we were able to meet in person and hosted annual events for not only our Latino, our clergy interfaith, our Asian American, and Caribbean and African advisory councils. We generally host meetings on a quarterly basis, providing PCA updates and other educational information. And for the languages, we oftentimes have those meetings or health fairs or educational events in Chinese, Korean, Cambodian, Hindi, and many other groups and or languages, making sure that we're translating the information that's disseminated at these meetings. Touching on a little bit before I hand back over to Bess and Roz, a little bit more on guardianship. As we approach older adult protective service cases, one of course, the greatest challenges is presenting when we're investigating and attempting to mitigate elder abuse if there's a decisional capacity of the victim and potential need for surrogate decision-making. And this is where we do our part to ensure that we walk a very delicate balance with the challenge of ensuring that we're avoiding reinforcing ageist stereotypes, things like equating dementia with normal aging process instead of recognizing that it's a disease state, failure to distinguish between dementing illnesses and other often chronic psychiatric conditions or other traits or medical conditions. An example of that would be a medical condition where individual may have sustained a urinary tract infection, which they could be physically manifested with confusion or change in behavior. So those are just a few things that we look to prior to touching on the issue of guardianship. And I'll hand it back over to Roz and to Bess. And once again, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Naja.
you, Naja. That was awesome.
We'd like to now turn it over to Judge Wood-Skipper.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for allowing me to participate in this webinar sponsored by the Probate and Estate section of the Philadelphia Bar Association, recognizing World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I am certainly grateful to be on such an esteemed panel, and I'm sure that the information they have provided will be very, very useful as you move forward. This event was specifically designed to coincide with World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is today. But we know that World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was to raise awareness about elder abuse and to promote policies, services, and programs to prevent it. But these are issues that are not only relevant today, but are relevant every day. And as you have heard, a lot of the statistics and the issues, we all come to recognize that this really is a crisis that significantly impacts all Pennsylvanians and the world as a whole. One of the disadvantages of being the last speaker is much of what you would cover has been covered by the other panelists excellently. And while some things bear some repeating, I will try not to repeat most of what they said. So this seminar was designed to help educate you about recognizing the signs of elder abuse, understanding the resources and remedies available, and learning to be your own best advocate. As has been discussed, the pandemic has been particularly challenging for elders, leading to isolation and failure to report and having to live with and through abuse. You've heard about the different types of elder abuse, the signs and recognizing elder abuse, resources and services, legal remedies, and investigation. Abuse is a tragedy inflicted upon our vulnerable seniors and an ever-increasing problem in today's society that crosses all social economical boundaries. It is an act that harms a senior or jeopardizes their health and safety. But what is the role of the court in protecting the elderly from abuse? And what, if any, help and resources are available? Seniors deserve to live safely, with dignity, and as independently as possible with the supports they may need. It is our responsibility to ensure that all who are involved are treated fairly, equitably, and with real justice under the law, and that seniors, our most vulnerable population, that they are not ignored and that their rights are protected. We need to make sure that there is access, due process, and the ability to effectively participate. So the impact of elder abuse can be seen in all areas of the court. And I think the other speakers have talked about that. You see it in criminal, civil, family, and in orphans court. You've heard about the different types of abuse that you may be dealing with: physical abuse, financial abuse, abuse of power of attorneys, caretaker abuse, guardianship abuse, title and property issue, and it goes on and on. And there's concern about the risk to older adults who suffer from neglect or who are victims of financial, emotional, and physical abuse. So the Supreme Court, under the leadership of Justice Todd, recognized the need to step up and do something. The Task Force on Elder Justice was created in 2013 to evaluate issues surrounding elders and to come up with solutions to address these concerns. This task force resulted in 130 recommendations, which now the Advisory Council on Elder Justice is working diligently to implement with the assistance of the Office of Elder Justice, both created as a result of the task force. The courts have responded to this crisis by implementing resources, awareness, education, and training statewide. The Advisory Council is working with judges, legislatures, agencies, executive branches, bar associations, educators, schools, healthcare, advocates, and legal aid, and many others to address these issues. The Advisory Council and the Office of Elder Justice are working diligently to implement the recommendations. Training and educational programs for judges, practitioners, court staff, and the public have been developed and completed and are ongoing. We have developed bench books and bench cards on elder abuse and neglect and guardianships. They have been produced, rule changes have been made and implemented, and the legislature has been suggested to the legislature and passed to deal with some of these concerns. Here in Philadelphia, there's a committee of individuals who sit on the First Judicial District Elder Justice Committee to address issues of access, due process, and the issues that surround elders in navigating our court system. We have established an Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center to help seniors and pro se litigants with information and guidance in the FJD. The center, while impacted by COVID closures and staffing and volunteer shortages, still offers the following services. It provides information on court processes and procedures. It refers seniors and self-represented litigants to legal service providers and services. It tries to connect individuals with volunteer attorneys and law student programs who can provide some consultants and assistance with filing. Right now, that is by appointment only, and obviously subject to availability of staff and volunteers. The center can also help with guiding beginners through civil and orphan court e-filing systems. A lot of people don't know how to utilize that, so the center can help with that. And really importantly, the center can assist newly appointed guardians with annual and inventory report filing. And as many of you know, based on recommendations from the task force and the Advisory Council, a new system has been developed by AOPC, the Guardianship Tracking System, under the guidance of the Advisory Council for that reporting to take place. The center is also available to share forms and information on topics of interest to elders and self-representative litigants and family members. So the center is ready to start expanding services as we start reopening more fully, and we'll be recruiting volunteer lawyers to help. So this is your opportunity to give back. As to the Orphans Court, we appoint guardians to assist with individuals who have been found to be incapacitated, and we provide oversight by review hearings, looking at compliance, which the reporting, which has been greatly aided by GTS, developed by AOPC. For judges, the bench cards highlight the signs of abuse, risk factors, remediation, and case management tools that assist with judges navigating these cases through the system. And it also makes judges more aware of any special needs and considerations such as hearing and visual aids, mobility, medication needs, the possibility or needing to adjust the scheduling of a particular case to deal with any of these considerations. The bench books on elder abuse and neglect and guardianship also help judges to understand and educate them and make them aware of the nature of the abuse and the increase in the amount of abuse going on, not only in this city, in this state, but nationwide. Judges can also determine if preventive or protective actions are necessary, such as protection orders or other things that may be restricted as a result of information that may be brought forth. The court can determine if an appointment of counsel is needed, or if service or services are available from any of the aging and adult protective services agencies. So guardians are vetted by the court in terms of their oversight. Once a petition is filed for guardianship, a hearing is conducted where the proposed guardian must appear, must be presented to the court to see what, if any qualifications they have, whether or not they understand what their role is, and the judge will assist in making sure that that is done. And so it is the judge who ultimately makes that appointment. But we do look very carefully to make sure, or to at least have enough knowledge to ensure that the person that is being appointed is an appropriate individual. We can also, as I mentioned, schedule review hearings at any point in time, either at the request of any of the parties or a family member or anyone else, or at the court's own discretion. I know oftentimes I will almost automatically schedule a guardian a review hearing if, one, there are a lot of complex family issues or disputes, and if one family member was appointed over another, and there may still be some issues that I want to make sure that are being appropriately addressed. Also, if I appointed a limited guardianship, I'm also looking to see whether or not the alleged incapacitated person has regained capacity or has additional capacity that I may want to address. So I think it's important to always take a look back and to make sure that people are in compliance with the orders and that they recognize that the court is watching. So I know you have received a lot of information today, and I know there may be some questions. So I'm going to stop at this point and hope that you have been educated on elder abuse and that you will become a part of the solution and step up and help in this arena. So I'll turn it back over to Beth and Roz.
Thank you, Your Honor. We don't see any other questions in the chat. So I guess we'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists and for your insight today.
And we would like to especially thank the probate section leader, Scott Small, Heike Sullivan, and the Bar Association for all your support. That's Tracy McCluskey, Rachel Kipp, and Chancellor Laura McKenna. Thank you again for all of your time and assistance in putting this program together. We appreciate it so much. We're so grateful for your time from all of the speakers and the participants. We hope you
Before we sign off, Beth and Roz, I see there's a question that if I could just answer that briefly. So to volunteer in the center, I'm going to ask that you contact Susan Chow, CHAU, who is the supervising attorney and director of the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center, which is located in room 278 City Hall. And her number is 215-686-7092. And she can assist you with how you can best be of service. And we certainly encourage, as we seek to open up a little more, all of you, if you have some time and interest, to please volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions coming in? I don't see any others.
Is phone or the best way? Is there an email for the EJCRC?
There is. Let me pull it up. I'm sorry. The email address is elderresource@courts.phila.gov. Can also be found on the court's website at courts.phila.gov.
It's a great center, and if you have the time, please reach out. They could always use volunteers. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us today.